Take a look at the first set of study questions for Genesis 3. As is often the case with these questions, considering the nature of the material, it's not always clear what the answer is. And, oftentimes it's not so much that it's an open-ended question, it's just that the text itself is ambiguous, and these are questions about interpretation. So, for instance, the first question, did the serpent lie to the woman? I don't think there's any clear answer to that, but to come up with some sort of answer, you have to look at the text and have some sort of interpretation. What does the serpent actually say to Eve, the first woman? Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? The woman said to the serpent, we may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say, you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die. You will certainly not. You will not certainly die, the serpent said to the woman, for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So, did the serpent lie to the woman? Well, the first thing that the serpent says is that they won't die if they eat the fruit. Is that a lie? Really, some people, I suppose, would interpret Genesis, the fall from grace in Genesis, the eating of the forbidden fruit, as bringing death into the world. That is the idea that Adam and Eve were immortal before they ate of the fruit, but that's not entirely clear from the text. They certainly don't. If they certainly don't die right away. It's not poison, so it's not clear whether the serpent lied about that. The second thing that the serpent says is, God knows that when you eat from it, and remember, this tree is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Is that a lie? Well, it doesn't seem to be a lie at all, to me, at least. Their eyes are open when they eat this fruit. They become different sorts of creatures. The text itself says that when Eve eats of the fruit, it says, when the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. That is, this promise that the serpent makes that their eyes will be opened and they will become more like God. It's just, I mean, I don't know. Everything needs to be interpreted, but it does seem to be true, especially given that God, after all this has happened, expresses a certain amount of anxiety about what's happened to the people, these human beings, and anxiety that they are becoming more like him, and that's why he puts the guard around the tree of life so they won't eat of that and live forever, because then they'd be a lot like him. So it's not clear, I suppose, whether the serpent lies, but it's something that you have to look at the text and come up with an interpretation. It's not clear at all that the serpent lies. It's not absolutely clear that he doesn't lie either, but it's certainly not clear that he lies, I think. Number two, what happened to the man and the woman when they ate of the tree of knowledge, which is also an open-ended question. And what happens to them is their eyes are opened. But what does that mean? Well, verse 7 says, and the eyes of both of them were open, and they realized that they were naked. So that's what happens. They realize their nakedness. And so they have this compulsion to wear clothes for the first time. What happens to them in the larger sense of self-awareness, perhaps, self-consciousness, that has to be interpreted. After all, the tree that they eat from is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So presumably, what happens to them is that they now know the difference between right and wrong. But it's not actually spelled out, really, in the text. All we know is that they realize that they're naked. So we can extrapolate from that and say that there was some sort of transformation of them from simple animals without self-consciousness or a moral sense to something that we would recognize to be human beings with a moral sense and some notion of self-consciousness. But that's interpretation. Number three, why do you think God didn't want the man and the woman to eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge? That's one of the deepest questions, theological questions, that comes out of this text for any religion that accepts Genesis as being scriptural, which is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. I mean, anybody in that tradition, in those traditions, the so-called Abrahamic traditions. Oh, that's a deep question for them. Why didn't God want the man, the woman to eat this fruit? We can only speculate. I mean, maybe he wanted to make a distinction between himself and human beings, and if they knew the difference between right and wrong, if they knew good and evil, they would be too much like him. That's one guess. There's certainly things that I've read by theologians who said that the reason they didn't want it is because they shouldn't have it, that their connection with God depends upon them not knowing good and evil. That in any case, what I don't know the answer to this question. I think there are a number of answers, but I think what's clear is that God did not want us to have a moral sense. So our knowledge of good and evil in this tradition is really something that has a shameful origin in theft. We had to steal it. Number four, describe the punishments of the man for eating the fruit. Describe the punishments of the woman. That's purely textual. Obviously, it's right there. The punishments of the man essentially are that he'll have to work. He'll have to earn his bread by the sweat of his brow. There's also some suggestion that now death will be a reality. From dust you come, to dust you shall return. Punishments of the woman are disturbing too, and maybe more disturbing, that she shall bear children in pain. She'll have to go through labor. The childbirth will be traumatic and painful. Yet she shall still desire her husband, and he shall rule over her. That seems to be, to me, in the text, an important and clear part of the text. That part of the punishment is that this woman will be ruled over by man. Finally, an open-ended question. What influence do you think this text has had on human civilization? That's really up to you. I would suggest that it's had a vast influence on how human beings look at themselves, how they conceive of God, how they conceive of their relationship with God, and how they relate to each other. I think that the whole sort of thing about labor and work being kind of a curse is right here in the text, and is very, very important part of human life, history, and civilization. The part of the punishment that where God says that the man shall rule over the woman, that's a very influential thing, I think. Has it been for the good or the bad? Well, that's for you to decide, not me.